You should be live now. There are a few different things on the agenda for today. Um, so that's good. We have stuff to talk about. I think this has been kind of a nice cadence where I do like one or two of these streams a week. We go a couple hours, we talk about everything that's new. Uh, there's some things that I still think we need to do a little bit more of, but today's main focus is going to be news oriented, as well as kind of showing one bug or talking about one bug that I've already talked about and some weird implications of it. And I think that's the majority. I also am working on a basically ultra tank. You don't want a PvP in the PvP zone kind of build guide, and I can show you guys like what I'm tinkering with, and then some things that are still going back and forth on with that. But yeah, there's a good amount of stuff to talk about today. It is a little bit early for a stream to start for me too, so we'll see how that goes. But AGS put out this new article. They basically acknowledge that the mist zone that they're adding is likely to gonna have a lot of problems, and then they sort of like take a step back, and then they've phrased that this zone is more of a experiment with quotes, and I think they're just basically trying to like take away the fact that they're calling it content, even though it's the only PvP thing we've gotten in the last year. In which case, the only content for returning players would be the raid, and that doesn't feel great either. Like, it's pretty clear that they didn't do a ton of testing with this, and there's been some issues that have been found. But we have 8 days till this patch comes out, so there's a good amount of stuff to talk about until then, a good amount of stuff to talk about after then as well. Okay, I see people popping in. I don't see anyone typing. I see my mic is working, so I assume this is like everything is working. It's just no one's Crush isn't here yet. Crush is usually here right away, and he he makes me realize that everything's actually working accordingly. So that's good. So I'm probably gonna wait a few minutes before we get into this in like a ton of depth. It's working. We're all just lurking. Okay. I could show you guys something I've been playing with for the people that are here early if you guys want. That's kind of interesting. I don't know what I really think about it yet, but this is something. This is I booted up New World for reference like maybe 3 times in the last 2 months. Okay, maybe 4. I think there was one time someone begged me to warlog, and then I warlogged, and then I realized that warlogging like was not worth like it didn't give me as much pleasure as not warlogging and playing a different game. So then I stopped warlogging. Then all the other times I've been to test random things. And this is related to Gearscore stuff that I've been was testing yesterday. Finally, Micro's live. Yeah, I promised people I'd do a stream. You gotta understand, I am very introverted by nature, so for me, it's always a matter of hitting the start buttons really hard. But once I hit the start button, like it's perfectly fine, like it's perfectly normal for me. But getting there is always a little tricky. It's a little easier when there's news that comes out from AGS, because I know it's like, okay, I really need to talk about the news, but there's also like 2 or 3 other things I kind of want to talk about that I was playing around with this week. Need a new door map for the love of God. Oh boy. Yeah, no, there are a lot of the Discord's gotten a little crazy. Uh Basically stuff like wasn't panning out exactly how it was intended, and then everything kind of blew up in the last couple of days. I assume everyone, well, I haven't looked at the video statistics for today. Have a good amount of people seen the video that I put out, or did I put it out at a terrible time and no one actually saw it? 2K people. Okay, so some people saw it. That's good. So everyone should be aware about the ammo change at least. I don't have to talk too much about that, but if anyone has any specific questions about that, feel free to ask them. But I think I answered them all in that video. I saw it was a bit over my in my head though, over my head. Yeah, high level, it's just that all ranged weapons effectively got a 5.5% nerf except for 3 abilities, and those abilities got like a 20% buff. So where is the dog I was testing with yesterday? Not the armadillo. There was like a dog roaming around over here. Did you kill my dog? I swear to God, if this bot killed my dog, that... Dude. I was testing with that. Come on, man. If you're gonna bot, please don't kill my animals. It could not be a bot, but it feels like a bot. Because it's... Well, at least it joined a faction. Oh, well. I could find a different animal to test with, but I was testing some PvE stuff over here. Oh. And it's really, really easy if you find one of these dogs to test PvE. Because they attack you, and then you can test stuff with them. But it seems like this guy has been killing all my dogs. Because they hang out over here. Explosive arrow does lightning damage with boltcaster. Yeah, it's still like the explode, like the arrow damage will scale with the arrow, but the explosion itself does not scale. So there's like two different parts to that, and the second part is the part that is bugged. The first part doesn't hit for the majority of the damage. It's the second part, or at least from the brief testing I did with it. Okay, there's a dog. Is there a high ground I could use to LOS? Yes. Okay, so this spot works. Um, so this is a pretty simple test. What I'm doing is I am changing my... Yeah, this doesn't have focus going. Cool. So I'm just going to be changing my gear score, and then I'm going to be using that gear score to test if gear score actually impacts PvE or not. So if I have this on, I have 693, right? And then if I take damage to this guy, so that's 251, that's 343. The 343 is what I used as a baseline yesterday, because that's a pretty consistent damage source. And then I could wait for this guy to retreat, and then I'll be out of combat, and then I could lower my gear score and test other things. So if I get rid of this, now I'm 512. And then, so I just dropped my gear score, right? But the damage I receive should be the same. Yeah, it's still 343. So dropping gear score doesn't seem to directly affect PvP in open world instances as long as you at least meet those level requirements, which I don't believe used to be the case. Now, reducing your armor will affect it, but dropping everything else doesn't affect it. And the weird part about this is, like, as we kind of know, or as more people that have paid attention to stuff have known, if you lower your gear score, that actually benefits you in PvP quite a bit. Now, lowering your gear score will affect your damage, so like usually your main hand you'd still keep at high gear score, but everything else you could lower and it doesn't matter. So I could lower my offhand to really low gear score, which is why I have like this 100 gear score wood longsword, for example, because I use that in PvP sometimes. And then like your jewelry and stuff like that, you kind of want low gear score. The weird thing that I've been playing around with that I still need to test, and this is kind of hard to test to be honest, is does dropping your gear score in PvP affect, like, does that boost damage towards you, or does that reduce damage if you keep all the same perks and everything else the same? Which I think I can test that with someone like outside of a zone, but in PvE it doesn't seem to have a big impact, which means that like dropping your armor will have an impact, but it doesn't have a huge impact. So I think that there's a way here to like optimize like a tank build, like if you want to be ultra tanky for this new zone, to just reduce your gear score as much as possible, but keep enough stats, which basically means you always want to be above, I think it's either 600 or 700 gear score, and then like I was messing with the build yesterday, but you basically just want 500 attribute points just to put all in the con, and then you're just kind of fine. What did they speak up about? They spoke up about... One sec, I gotta go tell my dogs they can't bark at everything. I have to LOS this dude first. Um, and in fact, that does mean reaching 725 for a PvE tank is unnecessary. Neglecting attribute bonuses. Yeah, it is. Like, your armor does matter, so like dropping my armor will cause me to take more damage. But like, if I look at New Road Buddy or one of those things and I just try scaling armor, it doesn't actually drop your armor by that much, so you don't actually take that much more damage. So this is something I was messing with yesterday. If I go to PTR New Road Buddy, and then I go to gear sets, and I go to this one. So I was doing a hypothetical most tanky possible build. No wait, this is the wrong one. This is an old one. Where's my build? Oh, it's here. Yeah, it's the one with the super. It's with the rapier. But basically, I was able to hit stat thresholds that I wanted. So like, I just want 500 con, right? I'm able to hit that, and then like nothing else really matters, and then I'm able to like lower my gear score effectively in a way that makes it beneficial for this. So there's like weird perks I'm testing out too. Like fortified seems like something that would be kind of odd, but taking into account the new shield ability where if you block stuff, then you extend the duration of fortify, like it could be kind of nice. But I don't know, kind of cooking with this. Oh, bots joins factions now. Not only that, they form guilds too. Wow. Okay, so they're advanced. Like that guy looked like a bot. So Muskin Union rep here. We don't let aim block in PvP. That is all. I've heard that from all the Musket Union members, and that's like one of the, well, at least the ones that post on the channel comments. But they talked about that a bit in a news thing that they put out. How many people do we have in here? We got 35 on the Twitch side. We got 41 on the YouTube side. So we're probably good to start talking about some of this other stuff. Sticky problem is the clunky animation damage is already very high, so ability will be kind of insane. We'll see some funny sticky clips for sure. Yeah, it has a pretty low cooldown too. Like even without the artifact, it has a pretty low cooldown. And like I don't think you have to go sticky bomb plus trap, you know? Like you can make a grenade or build and not run a musket artifact, because a musket artifact is not the best artifact for increasing damage. Like I imagine there's some funny stuff there. Do I want to do the article first, or do I want to go through other stuff? This testing I'm probably going to be doing separately or like throughout the day. I asked someone that I tested the old Gearscore bug with if they'd be willing to test the new Gearscore bug with me too, because I wanted to go through that in terms of PvP. The high level takeaways from making a Abyss tank build from this new setting is Enchanted Ward's really, really good, because Enchanted Ward's just a Abyss thing versus PvE enemies, because base damage reduction is super, super strong versus PvE enemies because they have 0% base damage. In PvP, though, base damage is like super, super common, but like from a tank perspective, like you're already going to be super tanky. Like I don't think it really matters. You can go with this and you're kind of fine. I'm curious, if I were to get rid of my sword, how much does that drop my gear score by? So this is 725 sword, right? If I get rid of that, I go to 455. It honestly might be worth running like a super low gear score sword, but I think doing the rapier is kind of enough and we don't really have to cook that much. What? What is this sword called? Bloodletter? I'm thinking the wrong one. No, I'm thinking of Albion. Gosh dang it. I don't remember what any of the artifacts are called. I've been away from the game too long. Oh, they added a shield drop down here? That didn't used to exist. That's really nice. I was trying to look through shields the other day and I couldn't find any. The Butcher. That's the one. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you guys the how changing your gear score changes things. So it's like if I'm 700 gear score, right, I have 454 armor, and if I go to 725, then I have like 473 armor. So it's like that's not much of a change in armor for the gear score I get. So I almost wonder if it's worth lowering your gear score on your armor, and you'll make up for the damage taking benefit more by having a general lower gear score, and also boost the damage that you're dealing. So it actually, there's a small chance that it might be best just to run 700 gear score items in PvP or like lower gear score to meet the minimum thresholds that you need, and then not go above that because of the gear score bug, which would be kind of funny. Sorry, or wait, what did the AGS speak up about? They released a news article about the PvP miss. Only thing that matters is aim lock change in that in the game's performance. Yes, they talk about aim lock a bit here. It's a bit ambiguous. I think I could start looking at this now. Keen speed boots. Oh yeah, that's another fun part. There's boots with keen speed on it, so like, you know, if I want to run around really fast, I could just run the keen speed boots. uh, I love New World. You just have to hit someone from behind and you can just zoom around. It doesn't matter. It's so stupid. I love how New World's endgame is literally just finding the most broken, like randomly dropped items in the game because they have some weird illegal perk combinations. What AGS say? Do we have aimbot or not? They say they're looking at aimbot, and they did not say they're removing it, which I think basically means we're gonna have aimbot. So I guess I'll start reading through this now. This is an article that AGS put out about the cursed mist PvP zone deep dive, aka the mist from Albion, but done worse, and Albion's been out for 7 years. I'm sorry to sound pessimistic, but that's the reality of it. There's a lot of issues with this that we talked about, like how everyone comes in and out from one side, like how it's not instance, like how you can tell who like people are effectively, so you could either team or not team with them, ally or not ally. Uh, and that is going to lead to likely results in sort of quasi teaming versus in Albion they have a system that you literally cannot tell who is who. There's zero way to tell at all, and because of that it turns into this mode that's really really competitive. It's actually the most dominant endgame mode in Albion right now, the one that people play the most, interact with the most, and it's been very very successful, and I wish that New World would just quasi copy that, call it something that's not the Mist so they don't get sued, and basically mimic its functionalities. Instead, they call it the exact same thing, and then they do like a quarter of the functionalities that the Albion Mist implemented. With that being said, let's get into this. So, greetings, adventurer. The foggy southwest reaches of Cutlass Keys are an lawless place where the Golden Creed curse of, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that person's name, as treasure drives fortune hunters to murderous madness. Even the closest of companions are liable to lethally betray one another. Gather cursed doubloons and resources, but you'll have to escape before the other looters steal your spoils. So the idea here is it's an FFA zone. You go in there, every loot piece that you gather will be put in your inventory, and if you die, you lose half of the stuff that you gathered. So this is basically encouraging PvP in a PvE-like zone, and there's a lot of like endgame resources there that people want to have access to, and the resources just generally spawn a little bit faster than the ones do in a normal open world, and overall it seems like a generally fun experience, assuming that no one does anything nefarious. I don't know why you thought they might remove it. Oh, at the aim lock? Yeah, there's not enough time to remove the aim lock. That's the other problem there. But talking about this zone, so they're basically saying with this massive murder balls of allied players, I think this is what they're trying to call like Zergs. I don't know why they call it a massive murder ball and not Zerg. But it's commonly referred to as Zergs within like larger groups of players, I guess. And they're saying that any new feature that's complicated is require a lot of playtesting. Yes, during all this testing, we discovered the unexpected but entertaining issues. Early on, it was possible for PvE players to range attack or heal lawless free-for-all PvP players from outside the zone's border. You can imagine the shenanigans that followed. So basically, it's just juggling heals, and you could pocket someone at the very edge, and that person could camp people or prevent people from leaving the zone. So that makes sense why they would try to remove that. We were delighted to find that many of the riskier features worked as well or better than imagined, often with hilarious results. Trying to collude with other players isn't a bad strategy, but it's horrifyingly easy to accidentally catch friends in AoEs when the fighting gets hectic. I fondly recall lots of laughing, yelling, and sometimes sincere apologies. So they're basically saying that in their testing, there was teaming itself, and they're trying to not hit each other. Yes, this is the result of friendly fire, but the thing that we've all mentioned here is friendly fire is not a problem if you use a ranged weapon, because then you can't accidentally hit each other effectively. Like if you use a musket, then you're not close, so your AoE is like a single target that's going to hit someone that's far away, and it's not likely to hit other people. So I don't understand how this applies to the player's concerns, but it's a note regardless that if you try to do this using melee builds, it's probably not going to work as well. If you're trying to use a bunch of short range builds like fire staffs or blunderbuss, it's probably not going to work as well. And this is more of a problem with the ranged longer range builds. I can not shoot people who are clumped in melee. It's hard to not shoot someone. Yeah, like even if you are a ranged player, like you can control who you hit and who you don't hit, right? Like I don't understand why they try to make this such a big point. I think they're basically trying to navigate the community's like concerns, and they're gonna be like, oh, this isn't actually as big of an issue as y'all think it will be. But I think everyone thinks it will be an issue, and I think whether you like it or not, if you know who is on the island, like if I hypothetically, I could bring up the tool here, Epic Pen or whatever. If there are 2 people on the island, like, or say there's 3 people on the island, right? Where's my little pen? There's my pen. So ignore the update here. Say there's 3 people on the island. Say I'm this yellow triangle, and then there's this blue square, or not really a square, more of a rectangle, and then there's this red circle. And say I know this red circle person, and I am familiar with them, and they know me. So we're basically both friends. And we see each other. We all see each other. What do you think is going to happen? Like, even if I'm not thinking about teaming, naturally, I'm probably going to be looking to kill this blue guy, and so is this guy going to look to kill this blue guy before we kill each other. So even from the concept of like, oh, teaming won't exist because people aren't going to do that, like it's naturally going to exist. If you know other people, you're likely going to default to being more friendly with people that you know and less friendly towards people who you don't know. So I don't think there's any basis for this idea that teaming won't inherently exist. Like it's just natural, as well as it could be used to advantage of like people that are actually seriously trying to do it. But it is a natural behavior for people. It's also a bittersweet treat to see the person who just murdered you pop up at a respawn point seconds later, having perished to something like your bleed or smolder. Okay. Also, fire staff is awful. I hate fire staff because of the bleeds. But so they're just kind of remarking about the zone and their experiences here. They're basically what they're saying here is they're trying to discourage massive murder balls, aka Zergs of ally players or groups, whatever you want to call it. There's always going to be collusion, but we don't want to make it easy, so we implemented a new FFA system that eliminates all group, company, and faction ties, or at least at the surface level. Even if you're fighting alongside friends, it's very easy to accidentally harm or kill one another, which again is why we're saying to use ranged weapons. We also implemented a new crowd control system that keeps players from lingering in large packs for too long. The question is how do you determine what a large pack is? How do you determine if people are allied or not? And then also, again, if we go back to the ranged idea, if you're all playing range, you don't necessarily have to be next to each other in a quote-unquote murder ball to be allies. Like, I think what they're implying here is that people stick together in 5 to 10 man zergs and just go kill one player at a time. Like, no, that's not likely to happen. It's likely to be, like, 5 players within, like, 200 meters of each other, but they're not going to be necessarily next to each other, and then you can't really distinguish that super easily from a zerg, which is, again, something that comes back to this fundamental idea of it has to inherently be hard to identify other players that you're in this zone with. Lastly, the loot chest functions like normal resources. Once looted, they're unavailable to all players until the respawn. Okay, so say I go into this island with a guild group of 20 players, and our goal is just to gather resources. We can just all gather resources independently, we deposit those to the guild, and then we do a guild payout, and then everyone gets an equal split of that resource, while we all inherently had an advantage because we could farm those resources for free, because no one can contest us because we were teaming. This doesn't make any sense to me. It's something that, again, is something that was fixed by not being able to identify other players, but it's something that New World hasn't done here at all. I think it will happen. I don't think there's going to be many people that are going to go living in that zone. I just plan on going in enough to get what I need for the day and then getting out again. Yeah, I think that's the saving grace of New World with the zone, is there's a chance that this is so, it's like, it's not popular enough to where teaming exists because people could possibly get their resources because there's not enough active players on that instance of the map. And if New World was really smart about this, what they would have done is they would have had like basically a portal or something like that, like a mode that you queue into, like queuing into CK, that would be cross like region. Like you could have multiple people from different servers. You hide the names of all those people from different servers. You make their gear effectively unique. They spawn in a random location. They exist in that zone for a period of time, and then it ends and people get out, and the people that live can get out. So basically they made it like sort of like a battle royale-esque experience, but not directly a battle royale because you can get out at any time. There's not necessarily a winner or a loser. It's just if you last longer in that zone, then you have access to more resources. Like if they made it that sort of system, then that would effectively eliminate a lot of teaming as well. There's basically like 10 different ways to eliminate teaming here, and they kind of went for 0. And they could have been very surface level and it would have prevented teaming. It's clear that they just didn't really acknowledge the issue that teaming could be prevalent. And now in hindsight, they're like, from all this feedback from getting from players, it seems like teaming can be prevalent. It's like, yeah, no shit. If you look at any other game that's implemented something like this, teaming has been prevalent. Even in like solo queue, like Fortnite games, teaming is prevalent. Like, I don't understand this at all. It's just confusing to me how this is something that you can't see with foresight. How dare you make sense? I like the idea, actually, if they were really smart, they'd make a procedurally generated island expedition thing. Yeah, like, I mean, that's what Albion does with the Mist, right? Like, you can go back to watching a Mist thing if you guys want to, but you take a little wisp thing that spawns randomly in the world, so you encourage people to go out in open world. This transports you to the Mist. The Mist itself has 4 different exits, so you have an exit at the left, the top, the right, and below, and it spawns you randomly in here. You could stay as long or as little as you want, and you just have access to good resources. And then, like, there's other things that pop up in the middle of these mists as well, because it's a time-gated event, right? Like, you can go to Abbey Dungeon. When an Abbey Dungeon it's basically another mist zone, but with better loot, but there's often, like, a higher risk of dying because the mobs are stronger and there's better players. So it's like, there's things like that that can be implemented on top of this that just inherently make a lot of sense, but the way that they're laying the baseline here, it's effectively just a zone that encourages, like, quasi-teaming, and it doesn't make sense to me. Like, they could have made this like a whole thing where it's like, if it was like an OPRs-esque, like, queuable game mode, it fixes a lot of their problems, and it's something that a lot of people would just do for endgame content alone. It would have been really, really cool. I do not trust AGS to do anything procedural. I mean, that's been the bane of their existence, though, right? Is AGS, they have not been able to do instance content that is, like, regenerating. Like, I was talking to someone about this today. Like, you think about Minecraft. Minecraft is static content, but it's procedurally generated, and it has a way to track that using seeds, right? So you could have infinite seeds, which are all identical if you load the same seed to someone else, but there's so many that effectively it becomes procedural. So, like, imagine that they just changed the respawn location of all the different items in this zone. Like, that effectively just makes this, like, a lot better. And then you don't have a lot of the worries that you had before. So I think we're able to see this on the New World Buddy, if I remember right. You go to Gatherables, and then you go to the Cursed. And then let's look at, I don't know, let's look at Orichalcum. And then we can look at the map. So this is the new zone with the Cursed Orichalcum nodes. You see how these are all static and have a certain spawn location? That's the only spot where they would spawn. Like, what if it spawned here sometimes, and it spawned here a different time, and then here a different time? Like, that would encourage people to basically explore the world a bit more. Like, you can keep the terrain, like, semi-static, but the location of nodes wouldn't necessarily be at the same spot every single time. Like, right now, the way it works is, if you look at this, these have a minimum respawn rate and a maximum respawn rate. But that means that they're going to respawn every single time over the span after 17 minutes or at the minimum of 11 minutes. Like, why do these have to respawn necessarily at all? Like, what if they made this range a lot longer? What if it was like 11 minutes or like an hour, but you needed to have a minimum of 3 Orichalcum vein nodes active at the same time, which encourage people to travel throughout the map? Like, I don't know. There's just like a lot of things that they could have done here to prevent like camping and like some of these other problems that are inherent to systems like this, and it feels like they haven't really done anything like that. I really don't like Albion in general. I'm too soft and don't like the camera angle, etc. But I do like certain things, like the Guild Islands in this version of the Mist sounds so much better. Yeah, I mean that's the thing I've had with Albion in general too. Is I don't like the 2D. That is the main thing I don't like about Albion, and that was the main reason why I never tried Albion after all these years. And then I got bored of New World, tried Albion. Within 3 months, I'm in the top 10 guild in Albion and NA, competing and doing all these other things. And it's like it's a really really good game, except for the 2D part. Like that's the only thing I don't like about it. And there's some people that play League all the time that are like totally fine with the 2D part, and Albion is just their crack. Like it's a good game. Also, did you guys see the AGS thing? This is a total aside, by the way. Uh, did you guys see the AGS thing that was posted about the players that are like getting together to do like a event or whatever? I think it was like Legends of something. Cause yeah, here it is. It's learned from Legends. So New World implemented this, and this is like talking to certain content creators, not me. Good for those content creators. I'm happy for them, but it's like this is they're trying to like very clearly cater to like the League of Legends audience. Like it's literally like the same art style. It almost looks like it was generated from AI. Uh, and to me, this is just like if Power World could be sued by Nintendo, I don't understand how Riot could not sue AGS for this. Like this is literally like the same thing. Like it just mirrors a lot of the stuff that League did in terms of the art style, and it's kind of funny to me. Um, but that's just a random aside. Learn from the legendary devs that turned God mode on while in the raid. It's also some New World players, some non-New World players as well. I think there's like one newer New World YouTuber that got in. I think Willie's in there. Uh, Baggins is in there, which makes sense. I'm actually surprised they put Baggins in there, but I think it's because his audience is too big to not include him. Because Baggins is both critical and like pro New World at the same time. Like he kind of fits that middle ground. Uh, and then there's other people like Duke and I that are definitely more critical of a lot of issues, and then there's some that I think we're happier about, but it's a lot of like New World did this like pretty well, but they could have done it so much better with like 5% more effort. Like that's generally both of our takes with like the New World stuff. uh and then there's like Lazy Peon, who he just reviews a bunch of MMO games, and he said he played New World for uh like maybe like 4 or 5 days worth of time recently, and then gave a opinion video about that, and that was really really popular. Can BLDG just go away? Isn't he the guy that bots, or am I thinking of the wrong dude? I'm pretty sure he's the guy that bots. 2 minute gather time, won't you just get hit gathering? Yeah, you'll get hit gathering, but the way it works is that if you get hit gathering, it will keep the gather time, if that makes sense. So if it had 25 seconds of gather time, I don't know if you'll get a bit of the node each time over that duration, but it will take you this entire duration to gather. This is also reduced by like mining and whatnot, right? Like if you have a higher pickaxe, high level pickaxe, it will take reduced gathering time. So yeah, I don't think you have to worry about that as much as you think for the nodes, but it will keep that time even if you get removed off the node, and then you can go back to it. So if I got hit when I had 10 seconds left on the node, it would still say 10 seconds left. It wouldn't go back to a minute, for example. Should have made it like ESO open world PvP where you queue up a server so the mode is always popping, or Albion's way too. Yeah, I mean that's both of those ways work really, really well. The way that they're implementing it here, it could be dead in 2 weeks, and then effectively like it would just be a gather whatever you need there kind of mode. Hi Meeker, have you gone over the gear bug yet? I didn't realize I could wait, what the hell could he do to this map? What did Genie do? Um okay, that feels weird. I'm refreshing the page. I went over the gear bug a little bit, but I didn't go over it in complete depth. Uh, I still need to talk about that a bit more. But it's basically your lower gear score is better for PvP, and PvE low gear score doesn't really matter. So in this island, which is PVX, right, is what they call it. New World officially calls this island PVE VP is what they call it. Every other game I've ever been a part of has just called this kind of mode PVX, where it's PV player versus anything, basically. And in that environment, lowering your gear score is still beneficial, but lowering your armor has a negative trade-off for PvE. So basically the idea is to lower the gear score of your offhand, lower the gear score of your jewelry, and that will strictly benefit you in this new zone. Also, meteor shower counts as a smolder that apply pyro alt proc the remaining meteor shower due to like all those dots. Like fire, like the smolder is just like too common of an effect. AGS like introduced perks that you could use to counter dot duration, and I think they intend players to try to use perk to counter dot duration, but what players really want to counter dot duration is like cleanses, and AGS is like not putting cleanse pot into the game as a common craftable for some reason, and I don't think anyone's really figured that one out. Speaks up, you say? Is aimbot removed? I should probably get back to that. We kind of got distracted. They address aimbot, or what do they call it in here? It's aim something. Or no, it wasn't in here. It was a different thing in the official Discord. They addressed it. Let me find the. There's a little bit more to this. See if I can find the picture of this. We put it in the Discord at one point today. Yeah. With relation to PvP target lock, the development team has taken feedback and some adjustments will be detailed in the release notes coming out next week. The focus of this thread, however, should be on the mechanics of the FFA PvP zone. So, they say they hear the concerns and they've taken feedback. Did they say they removed it? No. So what this basically, best case scenario, with this mechanic, let me open this in a new browser so I can draw around it, this is best case scenario. This is aim assist. Can you make a good aim assist in like 15 days though? I'd argue no. So I don't think this is aim assist, and I think they just played with some of the values that were data mined in terms of what they call the like magnesium or something like that in game. And basically it's just like how tight you turn, like basically how robotic your movement is. Because the way this currently works is if I locked onto a player, so like say I am this square and then this guy is a triangle, and then I dodge roll behind this triangle is now going to turn and it's going to face me, and there's not going to be any time to hit this guy in the back. So this, what the aim bot effectively is doing right now is it removes the usability of any perk that has a backstab-like effect, which is basically rogue and pen backstabs. Those perks would effectively be useless if this went to live in its current form, because you can just completely outplay these mechanics by literally just pressing one button and target locking onto the player that is trying to hit you. The only spot where those would ever be usable is in an instance where there is large-scale combat, think OPR, think war, where it would be very hard to target lock to every player that possibly could hit you, so you'd probably be able to adjust accordingly and not get hit from behind. If only AGS would talk to someone with good PvP info like Vangie and implement some of this stuff. I mean, they talk to people. The recent thing that a lot of us have been talking about, maybe not publicly, is we don't think AGS actually, I know this is a big surprise, we don't think AGS actually writes their own code. We think they outsource that, and we think that they have like kind of like a manager layer in the US that like oversees it, but doesn't necessarily interface with the stuff on a day-to-day basis, which would make sense because there's a lot of issues that come up with the actual code base itself. And then you could actually see this in game too. If I pull this off screen for a second, I think someone linked this to me earlier today. Oh no, I don't have it. I don't have it. You could see in the credits page, they credit a bunch of other studios, so they clearly outsource some of their work, and we think that they outsource like some of the actual fundamental code itself as well. So we don't actually know we don't know how much of the work AGS is actually doing. My primary concern was full tracking someone with BB or projectiles for close range. The most aiming is already pretty easy. The only nuance thing is for timing for iframes. Yeah. I mean, it seems like they're likely going to keep that. Like, I think BB is still going to fundamentally be broken with aim lock, which is why we've been calling it like New World Aimbot Edition, like instead of New World Eternum, because that's basically what it is. Like that's the biggest turnoff I've ever seen for people in New World wise is literally just the aimbot stuff. Like they've been trying to downplay it. I think they call it target lock, so they aren't calling it aimbot. Because aimbot has negative connotations. It literally is aimbot in its current form. It's just a poor man's aimbot because it's not implemented correctly. Because they haven't wrote aimbot code before, but it behaves exactly like how an aimbot would aim. And then they're making an aim assist thing, which would be a solution that a lot of people don't like still because of things like the Zim. But I think that's a conversation for 3 months down the line and not a thing for now. But aim assist can be turned into aimbot with a little bit of help of hardware manipulation on consoles, and that's not super easily tracked. There's been a few new games that have come out, like Overwatch, I believe, has a way now to detect Zims, and they ban people who use them, but it's not a common occurrence, and I don't think it's something that's available to easy anti-cheat. Will you do the PvP builds on the site again after the update? I think so. It's a lot of work. To me, it depends on like how many people are playing the game, but I know people want them. Like I saw a Reddit post the other day, and it was like all these builds are out of date. I haven't seen a build done since like 2022 or something like that, 2023. And I put out a few builds, but most of the stuff I have nowadays is like reviewing builds. It's not actually building builds because the way that you build a build depends on the context that you're building for. And there's a lot of variables to how builds work. Like in PvE, base damage reduction is really, really good. But in PvP, base damage reduction is really, really bad. So for instances that you kind of want both, like this new situation with the open world PvX environment, which one do you want? And you probably want something that's like a little bit more in the middle. Maybe use Fortify, maybe use base damage, but have other ways to supplement the PvP side. Like there's like a lot of variables there in terms of like actually how you want to build out your character. Will Fresh Start be good? Yeah, Fresh Start would be good. Fresh Start will be good for like 2 to 3 weeks at a minimum. I think Fresh Start is where the majority of content is at for New World this time around. The end game content effectively doesn't exist in my opinion. I'd argue that the end game content is from a PvP side is not war anymore. It's actually just OPR because OPR is going to have that MMR component. There's also a funny thing that someone pointed out to me today that's kind of pertaining to that, and I didn't think about this till recently. Let's see if I could find this. Jump to present. Yeah, there we go. So you guys know how people talk about war loggers all the time? It's like, do you know why war loggers exist and like why they got so good? So this is Valhalla on the current US East server, and there's like 2 to 3 servers right now in the US East. And the main thing to point out here is there were 49 servers that got merged down to 1. So you take 49, right? There's 2,000 people per server. So that's 98K like players that then got filtered down to 2K. And then people wonder why these 2K players are better than new players that come into the game. Like, I don't think people understand that the people that got good at PvP got good for a reason. Like, you had to, or you literally just lost your slot. And that's how it was in the past and why it's so hard to get slots now. And I don't think AGS could fix it with its current systems. They're actually making it worse. Because by increasing player pop, they are effectively increasing the amount of players that compete for the same war slot, which inherently makes war more competitive. And it's like, I don't know what they're exactly going for with this war system, but they're making the war system more and more competitive for slots and giving new players less and less opportunity to get these slots. And it feels like they aren't even like learning from this at all, nor like responding to community feedback, and it's super, super frustrating. MMR component for West servers literally means nothing. We could barely fill up a full OPR group. Yeah, that's true. You hope that with the higher server population, it bounces out a bit. And then with the current amount of players that are playing, like say there's 40 players, like maybe they have MMR, so it's like a little bit less. Like you'll have wider queue ranges, like with people with higher MMR versus lower MMR, but they'd be balanced in each team. So I think it's still like a better idea because it has at least some form of a matchmaker, and you have like less of those like 1,000-0 games and more of those close games. But I understand more people come about when they say we can't do MMR because the game's dead, because that's like a fair point. You'd hope that the game wouldn't be dead after this and then after cross region stuff. But the reason you said there is also the reason why a lot of people have been moving on to US East servers because they just have higher player pop. Should should just limit the amount of servers a player could be on. That's what made it so hard to get into wars in the first place as a casual. The issue that you hit there is that most war loggers don't do it all on one Steam. They do it on different Steams. So you would have to track it by IP, which I would not trust AGS to be able to do. And IPs aren't always static; they're sometimes dynamic. So it's very very hard to limit from like it's just very hard to limit. Like going attacking the problem that way is a more difficult solution than making a war a queuable instance event effectively that gives you rewards based off a ranking at the end or something like that. Like, what if war was available as a queuable mode between 7 and 10 p.m. Eastern or something like that every day, and then based off how you did versus your opponent, you go higher or lower on the ranking system, and then there are rewards given out by the rankings at the end. The issue that you run into there is now all your territory systems, so like uh, invasions, like upgrading or downgrading equipment, don't necessarily apply. Uh, but I feel like it's a better system than what we have now. Bigger servers means self-made companies can declare on what they think and practice the way I think. Also, I think bigger companies now allow more companies on one server to fight for smaller territories. Bigger companies only fight for like two to three territories, to be honest. Yeah, like the bigger companies have tried to help this like artificially, but there's not been like a system that AGS has implemented to like aid the war effort at all. Like fundamentally, your problem is you have a bunch of these players that were dominant on their server that just got transferred to other servers, became dominant on that, and those are the players that are left that are taking all the slots. Like it's just fundamentally hard to get into the scene at that point because of that, and that's why you get those big tier gaps where you hear people talk about T1 wars, you hear people talk about T2 wars, T3 or T4, and T4 doesn't really exist now because there's not enough servers for people to really mess around with stuff. War scrims would solve the majority of the issues with breaking into the scene. Lots of dead weight that can do the bare minimum, and risk of taking someone new is too high. Yeah, it would. War kind of has to be pre-made the way it is now. It's all about the comms and the microcoms. OPR effectively already is war for random matchmaking. Yeah, that's another way of looking at it. The hard part is like, could you ever solve the war problem at this point? Or are we just fucked because the game used to be 1 million players and then now it's like, 5K, and those players that played when there was a million and were slotted then on the most competitive servers are still being slotted now. It's like I don't know how that necessarily gets solved. And then there's always a big experience gap too. Like that's the biggest thing with war. It's not a mechanic issue, it's an experience of issue of like what to do, where and when based off of various conditionals. So I don't know, some thoughts to talk, or some things to think about there. Meeker, do we have any theories or further info on the aim lock content? Not besides the stuff we just looked at Discord, where AGS said that they've taken into consideration the aim lock and they're basically looking into it. Is this worth it looking at? I don't think so. But yeah, we haven't heard much about the aim lock. What's the best PvP perk on a melee medium build if you had to pick health, elemental aversion, or shirking fortification? If you are in war, elemental aversion. If you are not in war, and you're in OPR with like some melee and some heals, shirking fortification. If you are in open world, probably elemental aversion because you are mostly going to be fighting ranged players in open world. So it really depends on the circumstance, but it generally goes between elemental aversion or shirking fortification. Health is only abyss perk on 500 con tanks because they are built to survive bursts of damage. In this new open world environment, I don't think health is going to be abyss perk on tanks, but it is bis in situations where you're not actively being healed a lot. So there's something weird to think about there. Dude, is the Ginge head wrap even worth for some builds, or is it a dead artifact? It theoretically is worth it for some builds, but it's basically a dead artifact. We did a tier list recently that... Oh shit, I never uploaded that to YouTube, did I? Oh crap, I need to do that. I thought I did that, but I just realized I forgot to do that. A Ginge head wrap I don't think is that good of an artifact. In theory it's pretty good, but in practice it's just like you don't really want to waste like vigor and invigorated on the same slot, and I don't know, it just it doesn't work out very well when you consider that there's other bonuses that work against this. So even if I have like the maximum possible vigor or invigorated, which I think with vigor is like over 100%, you still don't reduce all the potency of debuffs because the people that apply debuffs passively have ways to increase the duration of your debuff duration, and that increased duration of debuffs is not actually affected by this perk, if that makes sense. So it's like, if I were to draw this out visually, like say this is the duration of a debuff normally, so you have that debuff extension perk, that's that secondary effect here. What invigorate and invigor affect is they only affect this part here. They don't actually affect this other part. And in reality, I drew this like this scale. It's actually more like this in terms of the scale. Like it's almost 50-50. So it's like if I spend all my perk slots to counter half the damage, like I'm not really getting effective use of all my perk slots. And that's I'd argue that's a flaw in how New World does its math in terms of debuffs and like how you counter them and whatnot. And it's just not intuitive. Shrug off should apply to extension durations would actually make it useful. Is shrug off a new perk? Reduce the base duration of non-crowd control debuffs on you by 20%. Oh, that's just the... Yeah, it's just this. Yeah, if it applied to not just the base duration, but the total duration, it would actually be useful, but because it applies to the base duration, it's not very useful. That's a common theme for New World in general. Stuff that applies to the base is generally not useful, but stuff that applies to the total duration is useful. The weird one to talk about is health. See if I can get this perk to show up. Because health, if you look at the... Do we have what the description of health is here? Yeah, so health on the live thing says 2.4% of max health. On the open beta, it says increase max health by 2.4% of the base value. If you look on New World Buddy, which just makes this even more confusing, and then I look at health as a perk. So we have like literally just different verbiage there. This is not health. This is health. So if I look at health here, you see max health is 0.03. So this is for an amulet, so it's the other kind of health because they have two that are called the exact same name. If I switch over to the live thing, it still says 0.03. So they literally changed nothing, but they changed the description and just made it really confusing, which is why it's like really, really hard to use the in-game tooltips and why I often have to go to New World Buddy to figure out what perks actually do because they just aren't consistent with their naming. They kind of improved this with the recent iteration of perks, but they still have some inconsistencies. Like it feels like they never did like a code review or something like that where they like really figured out what a perk actually does. They're just like guessing and checking, and that's it. And each guess and check iteration takes like a year to implement. Do you think Bruiser would be good in the new update? I think Bruiser will be played similarly to how it's being played right now, where you're just on your Warhammer 95% of the time, and you're only on your Great Axe if you're looking for a Deado combo, but it will be played. And the main reason why I think Bruiser will be played is 90% of Bruiser players are literally one tricks, and they've been playing the game for so long, and they haven't played anything else to the point where they wouldn't be useful in any other role. And it is a lot easier to keep a player on their one trick than it is to teach a new player to war. So I think bruisers will still be used, like, because of that, like, kind of forced reason, but it will mostly be on the Warhammer side because Warhammer has passive grit and the Great Axe side does not have passive grit, so we're just not going to see it as much anymore. Why did the fuck did they add that text? I don't know why they added that text. They literally did nothing. I was so upset because I looked at this and I was like, oh my gosh, they just nerfed the heck out of health. It's not actually going to be useful anymore. And I think I almost made a video about it. And then Finch pointed this out to me. And I was like, why the heck would they bait everybody? Like, it makes zero sense. Like, why would you update the perk description if you're not going to change the perk? I'm sorry, dude. I'm sure you answered 100 times. What did AGS speak up about? They spoke up about PvP aimbot, and they spoke up about the new zone. Okay, I'm gonna go back to Twitch or to YouTube chat because I've been looking at Twitch chat for a while. If you meteor crit and you hit a heavy attack, you can literally proc the pyro ult in the next heavy. Yeah, with fire staff. Yep. Meteor shower is gonna be really, really good for like medium to large scale next patch. Like, it's like one of the best abilities in the game. And they basically just gave it a passive disease that's not cleansable. So if I go to fire staff here, and I'm on open beta, right? Yeah. So Meteor Shower applies disease, reducing incoming healing by 20% and outgoing healing by 10%. The main thing here is it's a passive effect. So if I'm in a Void Gauntlet aura, then I have a passive Empower that can't be stripped, right? Like the same idea as here where I have a passive disease that can't be cleansed. So this effectively makes this a must-have and makes it so that cleanse won't be as effective and invigorated won't be as effective. Both of these effectively get nerfed versus Fire Staff, which makes Fire Staff even better, even though it's already like a must-run in large-scale environments. So Fire Staff is like if you were to pick one weapon and that was the only weapon you wanted to be good at for every single spot of the game and not change any other weapon, I'd probably say Fire Staff right now. Like, it's really, really good in solo play. It's really, really good in medium level play. It's really, really good in large level play. They're buffing it in PvE. It didn't get nerfed by the ammo change thing that we just put out a video about. And, like, I don't know. Like, the new raid is, like, all Angry Earth too, so Fire Staff does more damage there too, right? So it's like, why would I not just play Fire Staff? Like, Fire Staff is, like, way too good of a weapon. But, yeah, like, it's just so strong. What protection perks will enter the meta? I think it'll be more of the same, where some people go Elemental Aversion, some people go Shirking Fortification, and both of them are like nearly good as each other. It doesn't really matter. If you're a lighter class, like if you play in light, you should probably use like Elemental Aversion or Enchanted Ward. If you are playing medium, you can literally go anything. It doesn't really matter. If you're playing heavy, Shirking Fortification's pretty good. The only concern about Shirking Fortification and heavy is you only have access to 2 dodges. Medium Shirking Fortification mathematically is still a little bit better than Elemental Aversion, but it's about your uptime. Like if you have like above 60% uptime, Shirking Fortification tends to be a little bit better than Elemental Aversion and those other base damage reduction effects. It's all about the uptime though, and often you can't guarantee uptime with it, so it's like kind of a player preference thing. I think bruisers are still important, to be honest. Gravel and Heart Rune. I mean, the main thing with bruiser that I think will change, so if I go to Great Axe, is I think people will start going left tree a bit more and start going less for Maulers, right? Because Maulers requires you to have passive uptime on your Great Axe, and you just naturally don't want to do that. There's also a new thing that they introduced that you could only acquire as a new player that's literally a best in slot earring, and it's like 500 gear score. Let me see if I could find it. It's buried somewhere in my Discord. Where's the ring? There it is. Deckhand's promotion. So this has Retaliate on it, which Jasper's normally like, this is normally 6% strike resist. But instead it has the damage bonus on there, so you gain 8% damage for 5 seconds after blocking or taking a hit at the maximum of 3 stacks. So if you put on this earring, you gain a free 24% in power. And lower gear score, as we've talked about recently, is better than higher gear score. So this is just the best earring in the game, but it only drops if you're a new player. Like, you have to get it through the new storyline. So this is like one of, if not the best item to acquire on those new fresh start servers, and it will boost your damage by a lot, no matter what weapon you play, and it's something you should definitely look out for. And you get it through the main story quest. And it's really stupid. But as usual, AGS didn't check the drops that they put in. And Fire Staff is so easy to learn. Yeah, that too. Fire Staff is like really, really high skill floor. So I think like bruisers will start using this, and then they'll start using left tree a bit more. And they just won't go right tree as much, because this will give them that passive and power they need, so they don't need to go right tree. And then everything else just like naturally kind of makes sense. Now the main caveat for a lot of builds that's coming out is Magnify is basically on all the endgame gear, to the point where you're going to run into issues with any builds that use more than 2 stats, or any builds that don't want to just split stats right down the middle. So if, like with Bruiser, for example, if you most bruisers would think with this new patch, okay, I want to get to 300 con, I want to get to 350 strength, and that's perfectly fine for me, but that's like a lot harder to do than you'd think, because all the gear just has Magnify built into it for some reason. I wouldn't be surprised too if we saw some bruisers like kind of give up on grit, and they start going like 200 con, maybe like 400 strength or something like kind of crazy like that, or maybe a little bit of int combinations with like the lightning warhammer artifact, or they try to get a little bit creative there and start doing a lot more damage, but sacrifice some of their constitution for that. Like, I think Bruiser has a lot of ways to iterate, but a lot of the ways to iterate right now are going to be through getting rid of grit. My heavy tower shield, flail, life, staff build, I'm able to get over 220% fortify. The extra 20% is the void, or void darkblade artifacts surpassing the cap, not including the base damage reduction. Yeah, that's insane. The noteworthy thing there is the amount of fortify you get actually levels off at a certain point. So fortify is not linear. It's like the fortify graph. You look at fortify over time and how much value it is. It's like logarithmic is like what they would call it. So it's like a lot of value up until like, I think this point around here is like around like 150%, which normally you don't have to think about. Let me rewrite that. I think I have a graph for this somewhere, but it's around 150%. So like, if you're like really, really fortify stacking, at a certain point, like you don't want to do it anymore. And Void Darkplate's really good because it makes every single instance of fortify better, right? So it's just it's a solid artifact to go as well. Musket Union will show AGS what they need to improve on the FFA Island. You could always count on that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. Like, the Musket Union's gonna show up. What I need you guys to do, though, the Musket Union needs to show up to West servers, because those are the only servers that AGS pays attention to, because they're the only servers they play on. And then they need to make that experience as miserable as possible, and then they'll actually fix things. But if you don't do that, they're not going to fix things. Like, if the experience on the East is awful and the experience on Europe is awful, but the West experience is fine, they're literally not going to change anything, because they have confirmation bias, where they will just look at their one server that they play. So it's like you have to look at El Dorado and make that experience as miserable as possible, and then AGS will actually fix issues. With the stamina recovery nerf, will it still be usable, Micro? I'd argue that bruisers weren't even using it in the current patch, so they're not going to use it in the next patch, but most like newer players might still want to use it that are gray barring like pretty often. Stamina recovery for people that is not aware, got a pretty heavy nerf. It also, noteworthy, you can't actually roll stamina recovery on the new jewelry. I think that's bug, though. Like, if I go to Gorgon Amulet, if I remember correctly, this doesn't actually roll on the new jewelry. Like, if I go to perk buckets, I don't think stam recovery is on here. So I don't know if you can upgrade this gear, but, like, you can't actually get stamina recovery anymore. And you can't get purify anymore, either. And I feel like they just messed that up, but yeah, you can't get that anymore. But that being said, if you do have something with it, it went from like 110 stamina or something like that to 60, and the cooldown got increased by 1.5x. People weren't even using this anymore that were like good players, and I don't expect people will use it again. Like usually you want health, protection, and divine. Like those are your three best perks for any build in the game on Amulet. Uh, and the reason why you want divine is because it makes your pots better, it makes any incoming healing effect better, and it counters disease. It's just like overall like a really really good piece to have. To the point where I actually debate running health over divine with some builds, but divine's usually your third best option. Are there anything else here that's like really noteworthy that's new? Oh, unimpeded is actually pretty good. Potencies of slows on you are reduced by 30% as long as you've not been exhausted within the last 10 seconds. That's actually a pretty good perk. So that one might see some play as well. That doesn't take any other slot too. So like maybe unimpeded, health, and a protection, like that's like your three bests. And then if you don't want unimpeded, run divine. Rat builds with move speed will rule in FFA, hatchet, great axe. Yeah, I think rat like move speed builds are inherently going to be really good. The other spot to consider is the thing that we pointed out earlier with the nodes. So if I go to gatherables and we go back to like cursed chest or something. I think it was cursed something. I don't know if it was chest. Oh, am I on live? I'm on live. Go to PTR, go to gatherables, cursed chest. So if I look at the chests and where they spawn, noteworthy thing here, they spawn all over the map. I guess that part's not really important. I just like the graph because it looks pretty. But these take like 25 seconds to gather. Like if you're wearing like a super like light rat build, you might get one shot while gathering these chests. Like I'm not gonna lie, if you're wearing like a 5 con like ultra rat build and you get shot by a musket once, you might just die. And I don't know if you want that if you're sitting in front of a chest for 25 seconds. And I don't know if you want that if you're PvEing. Which is why I'd argue like the thing I'm trying to theory craft and started to theory craft is you should probably have some sort of tank set that you at least swap to before you gather one of these things that's just built for ratting. And then you swap back to your normal set when you're trying to leave, if that makes sense. And because you're using so much magnify, you likely won't have to change your attribute thresholds very much. You just need to hit the equip button on your tab, go to like SNS Rapier or something like that. You're basically invincible and you just won't take damage to people and you can just PvE. And when you want to PvP, then you swap back to your PvP set. And I actually think this is going to be the thing that gets SNS nerfed and gets the Gearscore Bug fixed, is if people abuse this enough, because I feel like the only way that stuff actually gets fixed in New World at this point is from abuse. It used to be if I cried wolf, AGS would listen. Nowadays, it is if there is something that is being abused and is publicly having backlash in every single forum possible, then AGS has like a 5% chance of listening and actually taking into account feedback. Like it is incredible that aimbot has made it this far along, considering there's been negative feedback for the last 4 to 5 months that have had this item like been around. Do you think if you have gather speed in CK, then you'll be able to gather faster in FFA if they're not smart? Hey Christina, how are you doing? I talked about you earlier today. We were talking about art theft. I brought you up as an example against your will. Or without your permission. Because, actually, Christina, I have a thing that I want your feedback on. Let's see if I find this thing again. Because they put out like a new logo for this game, and I'm pretty sure it's like borderline copyright infringement. Let me search for League and see if it pops up. Yeah, this. From like an art perspective, is this okay? Or is this like way too far across the line? Because this is like very clearly just League of Legends, but then just like modified ever so slightly. Like I'm pretty sure AGS just doesn't care, and like people don't care that much anymore, but I'm pretty sure this is just art theft. Like what is the League of Legends logo? I guess it's slightly different, but like it feels very, very similar. I don't know. Why isn't League of Legends dead? Uh, this feels very leaguey to me, but ADS is doing a thing like this. mobile game energy. I'm surprised League of Legends isn't on mobile. Like that's a game that like I actually think could be very easily implemented on mobile. I think Vainglory was a League clone basically, or League clone S game that is on mobile and had like competitive tournaments for a while. And it was I played that game. It was kind of cool. Not super popular, but definitely cool. I don't think there's anything else in this article to really talk about. Uh, Gosh dang, why does my light not work? My light turns on and off randomly. Yeah, and they just talk about cursed energies or like the economy. Like, yeah, none of this is really important. Uh, the main thing is that they're trying to discourage cheating. They said they have some sort of mechanic that's going to prevent cheating. You don't really know what that is. It could be like the influence race mechanic where they just like kick people out if they're too close to each other. It could be like lightning that comes down from the sky and like hits you or something like that because they show like lightning in these pictures or whatever. But I mean, the new zone looks cool. It's just I don't know how effective it will be in terms of the chest gathering. League had Wild Rift on mobile. I know they have like the auto battler on mobile too. Zone looks kind of sick. Hopefully they optimize shit. Yeah, I mean this looks really cool. There's probably gonna be a lot of like PvE in it, I'm guessing. The other God, this is a weird thing to bring up. Does it ever make sense to like use calming or something like that in this zone and then use the mobs to your advantage to fight other players? Does that make sense at all? Like beloved or calming, like those effects? Because I know they don't really exist anymore, but if you reduce your threat and someone else hits you, I wonder if the mobs would ever go to the other person or if the mobs would, or if the player would have to hit those mobs first. Is that the PvP zone? Yeah, yeah, this is the I think this is the PvP zone. I wouldn't consider that art theft personally or plagiarism. It's just very generic looking art direction and font for the genre. Okay, it was probably done very quickly and turned out so it could be applied to many games. Gotcha. Yeah. Basically, the art's so bad that it doesn't matter. Okay. Beaker, did you see the taunt threat video from Mojito? SNS not generating a shit ton of threat slash taunts now? No, I did not see that one, but I don't PvE a ton. AGS finally said that they're taking out target lock out of PvP. They've said that, but like I don't think it's like accurate. I think these are like this actually looks like it came from the game. This is like more of concept art. This looks like it actually came from the game. Also, I love how they have this pirate ship here, and you're probably just not going to be able to climb up it. Like there's a ladder, and you just won't be able to climb up the ladder because it's not a capability within New World. It looks cool though. Because they might not have the ability to scale back aimbot, they might introduce a damage penalty while using it. Maybe like 30% damage for aimbot hits. I mean, if they did that, that'd be a happy medium for me. But I think it would be like 5 or 10%, and then they would just add it to base damage, which effectively would make the penalty null, and then I would complain about it, and they'd say they nerfed it, what are you talking about? And then we wouldn't ever see eye to eye because they don't understand that base damage is like a super, super common thing. I think SNS needed more threat because you won't be able to light attack as much. Yeah, like you can't. I mean, if you're building for tankiness, you don't do damage. If you don't do damage, you don't generate threat. So you have to use abilities to generate threat. And there's only like, I guess there's 3 abilities on SNS that generate threat. But like the best way to like, I feel like they've almost made this mandatory. But there's like an earring that passively generates threat, right? Like, don't you just have to use that? Or not an earring? Yeah, this. Taunts are active, generate 300% more threat. Stuns last 1 second longer, but base damage is decreased by 10%. Like, I feel like you almost have to use this. Heavy attacks from SNS now generate threat. Okay, that's good. So, wait, they added a passive effects to heavy attacks on other weapons too? I thought it was just the mage weapons. Because, like, the mage weapons, like Void Gauntlet and Ice Gauntlet, they added, like, effects. Like, Ice Gauntlet applies a slow now, Void Gauntlet will go through people. Life Staff has a heavy attack that will push people back. Which I think is going to be kind of broken, but exists. All melee weapons have a 0.5 second taunt on heavy attack. Huh. Alright. So does that mean you can't use Greatsword as a DPS weapon anymore? Like, I imagine they didn't think about that, but like Greatsword used heavy attacks all the time. Only with gem? Okay. Good, they thought about that. I thought they just, like, deleted Greatsword from the game. Dargetti, what is this video? Heavy attacks from mage weapons consume mana. Always a silly choice. Yeah, isn't there, like, a perk, though, that, like, gets rid of that for some weapons? But yeah, it is a silly choice. Like, for fire staff, there's a way to get rid of that. Oh, I don't think I've seen this video. I mean, we could play it and we'll look at it. This guy posts videos now? Isn't this guy like something that hasn't done videos in a like I've heard of him, but I didn't realize he made videos.
On the October 15th, New World Aeternum is coming. It's not a new game or an expansion, but it is a massive update that marks a polished new chapter for the game since its launch 3 years ago. New World Aeternum brings a ton of exciting updates. There is of course the very first 10-player raid, the Hive of Gargons, a huge free-for-all PvP area, increased Gearscore, console release, bigger servers, starting loadouts, better optimization, finished questlines, PvP matchmaking, repeatable boss fights, stagger or normal attacks in PvE. But today, we're not diving into the usual updates. You can find plenty of videos of these changes elsewhere. No, today we're going full nerd mode. We're digging into something that hasn't been talked about much yet, changes to threats and taunts. So, like the true nerd I am, I was deep diving into New World's beta datasheets, until finally I found some undiscovered mysteries, and exactly like Christopher Columbus did, I thought I should make a YouTube video about it, so here we go, time to show you the nerdy stuff. In the datasheets, there's a file called damagetable.csv that outlines how each player attack works. One column in particular caught my attention, Threat Multiplier. I'd heard that AGS was working on changes to how threat and taunts are generated, so I decided to take a closer look. In this file, each one of the data is a damage row. These rows reference different types of damage, like abilities or dots. Each column is giving details about this damage row. If it's considered a ranged attack, a light attack, a heavy attack, or an ability, the damage type, or more importantly the damage coefficient, which is here to calculate the damage the ability will do. But if we go further to the right of the sheet, all the way to here,
I can pull that
this
up.
part of the data is all related to threats and taunts. But by the way, if you are very casual to New World, you probably wonder even what threat is. Threat, you can think it like an invisible aura that determines if you'll be the main target, or we say have aggro. Your threat level mainly changes based on the damage you deal, healing you provide, and certain perks that affect it, as opposed to taunt.
Yeah, so like it's weird, but the way that people like generate threat at like a high level is the focus is often on doing high damage, and then you use these threat gems instead of doing normal gems. And you don't actually focus on like traditional tanking. You just focus on doing damage, and that will generate threat. Versus tanks that are like really passive, and they use like super heavy, like they use all heavy. They don't focus on damage. They don't actually generate threat, so they don't actually pull aggro. So you see, like, most of the end game's tanks are actually wearing, like, light sets and, like, light shields, even though that isn't what you think about in a tank. Because if you wear the heavy stuff, you don't generate enough threat to pull aggro. At least that's how that currently worked.
Which is just forcing enemies to choose you as the main threat for a certain duration. So now that that's clear, let's go back to our sheet. The threat and taunt area of this data is divided in 6 columns. threat multiplier that tells how
He
much
has a
the
tank
attack
in your order,
is
just light
raising your
attacking.
threat.
Yep.
If it's 1, then it generates the default amount of threat. 0 means it doesn't generate any threat. Below 1 means it generates less threat than most attacks. And above 1, you guessed it, means you'll generate more threat with this attack than others. Then we have add threat, which doesn't look relevant. It's the same as threat multiplier, but in its additive form, but there's not much interesting to see here for this time. And finally, we have 4 columns, here related to the taunts. Ease taunt, taunt duration, taunt threat boost percentage, and taunt minimum.
Oh, so spear heavy attacks. So yeah, the melee heavy attacks they have is taunt. Yeah, okay. So I see what you're talking about, where they'll actually activate a taunt for a certain period of time. So that means that if you're using any of these effects, like if you're using Cyclone or if you're using Pole Vault or something like that, this is actually an active taunt. But you have to have the taunt thing, is what you're saying, right? If you have a Carnelian gem equipped in your sword, all activating this ability. Yeah, exactly. You have to have the Carnelian, which is the taunt gem.
Threat value.
So you can actually use these abilities.
Basically, the first one boosts the threat you generate with the taunt. The second one sets a minimum threshold, so if your threat is below that value when you taunt, it gets bumped up to meet it. If you want to go deeper into understanding how threat works, here's what we assume to be the threat formula, pretty much.
There's a threat formula? Someone figured that out? Oh, that's pretty high level. Oh, never mind. Oh, it's not awful, but yeah, it's pretty high level.
To be the threat formula.
I know all the PvP formulas, I don't know the PvE ones.
Okay, so now you know everything on how to find this kind of data. Now we just have to look at each damage row, compare the beta version and the live version, and interpret the damage identifiers to assign them to their in-game names.
Yeah, so during your get diff.
The threat changes of the New World Eternum. First up, the blocking threat multiplier has been buffed from 1 to 2. So now, when you block damage, you'll generate twice as much threat as before. Then, when you do damage, your threat gets higher. But how strong it works depends on the tag threat multiplier, as we talked about it before. The default value, which is used for most of the attacks in the game, is 1. But this value has changed for a few attacks. On the sword, it has been increased. When you do a simple light attack, it was 1, now it's 1.5. On your third light attack, your damage creates twice more threat as before.
Wait, why?
And the heavy attack, fully charged or not, gets a threat multiplier of 3.
So what they're doing here is they're basically forcing sword to be a tank weapon and not a DPS weapon, which it wasn't a DPS weapon before, but there's no reason to like necessarily force this. Like it should be... Like this is something that should be conditional with the gem that you have equipped and not as a passive effect.
So this will greatly help Sword users to keep the aggro from the enemies without having to do as much damage as his DPS friends. This is even more true as Sword already had the Shield Bash, which has a threat multiplier of 5 and 10 when it's upgraded in the skill tree, and the Shield Rush with also a threat multiplier of 10. You can't
use SNS as a DPS weapon in PvE anymore, basically. Yeah, that's what I'm reading.
Multiplier is higher than 1, and that is the Great Sword with 1.5 on the Steadfast ability hit and 2 on the Rupture hit. Then the threat multiplier.
Yeah, Sword used to have the highest left click damage. The idea there is that I think someone from ESO was pointing this out the other day in the Reddit. Is like, why can't you use Sword as a DPS weapon? Like you have 3 to 4 perks on a sword, right? And then you have 3 to 4 perks on a shield. You combine those, you have like 6 to 8 perks, and most weapons only have 3. So surely Sword's like the best DPS weapon. It's like, yes, it was used that way as a DPS weapon at one point. The problem is like a pure glass cannon, and people would rather take defensive perks at a certain point. Like some of those DPS things that people are taking are like Vicious, and Vicious is like not that great of a perk DPS wise. So people would rather void that, take an illegal shield that had access to a damage protection perk, which you shouldn't be able to have access to on a shield that's like a light shield, and then they just use that instead. I bet it's all 1-to-1 damage unless you have Carnelian, but maybe I'm wrong.
There has been decreased for a few attacks that were causing DPS players or healers to steal aggro too easily. These are now set at 0.5.
I assume he talks about that here.
The Gauntlet, the Skewer from Spear, Tondo from Rapier, Powder Burn from the Musket, the Flamethrower and the Burnout from the Fire Staff. There is also this special case of the Repost stun, which for some reason had a threat multiplier of 10. It's now reduced to 1.
What?
And then many damage over time abilities also have got their threat multiplier halved. From what I could find, it's the case for the Smolder Burn from Firestaff, the Rapier Bleeds, every Void Gauntlet dot, the Bleeds from the Greatsword, Impairment Arcane dots from the Flail, Pestilence Artifact Poison, the Burn from the Grenade, upgrade of the Blunderbuss, the Burn from the Explosive Arrow, the Bleed from the Musket Traps, the Bleeds from the Butcher Artifact and the Gladiator Artifact, the Poison from the Venom Artifact.
Who uses the Gladiator Artifact? I mean, like, I guess, like, he talks about that probably because he saw it in the data mine, but, like, no one uses the Gladiator Artifact. Is this Throne and Liberty? I wish.
The Bile Bomb, the Firestorm, as well as the
those devs actually iterate fast, but no, this is
and
New
finally
World.
Also the Shirking Elemental perks and the Elemental Attunement perks, which are considered by the game as 1-tick dots. And finally, for the threat multiplier column, there were 4 healing perks that were not generating threat before and had their threat multiplier up from 0 to 0.5, which are the Purity of Light perk, the Purifying Breeze perk on life staff, and the 2 instant
So
healing
threat
ring
management
perks,
looks like it's
Healing
going to have to
Breeze
be a
and
lot more
Purifying.
active than it
Even though
was
we're
before.
not sure if this will change anything on the threat caused by these perks, as they don't really do damage, they do healing. Talking about healings though, we're done with the changes on threat multiplier, we can quickly talk about the heal threat multiplier, which works the same as the normal threat.
Okay, I don't really want to go through this whole thing, and he didn't put timestamps. Okay, so this is the part where he talks about the...
of some weapons will now apply taunt.
Yeah, you have to run the Carnelian. Okay. Is there anything else here that is important? I guess Void Gauntlet doesn't necessarily count as like a melee weapon in that instance, but yeah, you have to have the Carnelian. Okay. So, I mean, if they didn't have the Carnelian, it wouldn't matter, but they have the Carnelian, so that's good. It is... I mean, I don't think that really changes a lot at the end game level. It changes a bit at like the early game level. Like you have to be like a little bit more careful because stuff will apply passive threats, but at the end of the day, a lot of it seems like you should generally be using like heavy attacks if you're trying to generate threat and use a Carnelian no matter what weapon you're using. And then make sure you're not using a Carnelian if you're not a tank, because if you're not a tank and you're using a Carnelian, you're just going to troll everybody in your group, and that won't be good. But they're like forcing threat to be more passive so that people can more easily have threat of mobs. So I feel like this is just like a buff to tanking in general. I'm living in an FFA zone, bringing thrust protection, y'all taking all the loot. I mean, you definitely can. I feel like the weird part about this is we're going to get quasi standoffs at a certain point, because if everyone's going for like similar loot spots and you can just like hit each other off of it, then it's just going to be like difficult to gather things. And I feel like a lot of people are going to be going tank builds and not necessarily going to want to fight. If you're in that FFA, potentially for SNS Disruptor to accidentally have more threat for shit. Yeah, that's true, but you have to use those abilities, right? Like you'd have to use Shield Bash onto an enemy, and then you would generate a lot of threat. So it's like you have to be a little bit careful there. Like I like SNS Disruptor is like something like I definitely could see in this mode, but I feel like I don't know, like it's something that should exist in this kind of mode. Like it makes sense for SNS Disruptor to kind of exist over here, but I feel like it's like not going to be as potent as people think, because SNS is like often paired with a spear, and I feel like SNS spear, even with the javelin stuff, is just like it doesn't sound as good in this sort of environment. Like I don't know. It should be good, and I feel like it should exist, but like gut instinct, like I feel like that's not going to exist as much, and it's going to be like more light focused, like OPR, and a little bit less disruptor focused. Like maybe on EU it will be a little bit more prevalent because EU OPRs have a lot of disruptors and they're a little bit less of the light cheese builds. NA OPRs are like a lot of light cheese builds, and a few like medium players and not many heavy players. So like, I feel like it is a little bit situational. People already running the tank build and trying not to fight in all open world content. Yeah, I mean that's what people are gonna do. It's like, do you want to spend 4 to 5 minutes to try to kill one guy? Like the thing I'm like been theory crafting in terms of like this tank build I've been theory crafting is like I'm pretty sure if I were to run this tank build, I think I can live up to like 5 people versus 1 pretty easily without a healer. Just because of butcher cheese with empowering or with the dot effects giving me fast ult charge, using that with the stone form, and then that will generate a bunch of HP. I have a bunch of HP built into like accelerated resolve. I could use these like kind of cheese things with survivor's coat, use my pots from endless thirst, and then like I'm pretty much always gonna be okay. Like I don't think there's a spot where I really will ever be like worried. I feel like the healing breeze I put on here because I was just like why not? But like you don't really need that. There just wasn't a better option at the time when I was looking at this perk slot. So I mean that was something else. Like realistically, it's probably like enfeebling or something like that, or blood. Actually, bloodletting kind of makes sense with this build, but I was just messing with stuff here. Like this isn't super serious. Do I see keen speed on boots? Oh yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, those are good boots. If you look at New World database. I feel like this is the easiest spot to look at it. Go to beta, go to acquisition, go to trial of the Devour. All this gear has like illegal stuff on it that's like not okay. Like this medium chestword has Keen on it for some reason. Like that's fair. Where's another one? This one has Enchanted Ward Elemental Aversion, so that's just good gear. This one has Desperate Empowered, which is, I know, everyone's favorite perk in the game. This one has Keenly Fortified, which I know is another perk in the game that is everyone's favorite and definitely doesn't need buffs. It's like completely OP and needs to be nerfed more. And then there's this Heavy Leg Wear that has Keenly Empowered that's honestly like really, really good. Heavy Boots, Keen Speed, really, really good. A light helmet that has Savior on it for some reason and Thrust Conditioning, so it's just going to be used by every single healer in the game. We got Keen on a light chest. What else is there? Is there anything else? No, there's nothing else. But, you know, there's a lot of, like, really, really stupid gear pieces that, like, should not have the gear that they have, but have the gear that they have. Does the Keen Speed on boots work on weapon swap? Oh, yeah, that would work on weapon swap because it's not tied to your weapon, right? It's tied to your armor. So, yeah, it'll work on weapon swap. Desperate Empower Pog. Yeah. Good gear Pog. I mean, good gear is in this game from PvE is only gear with illegal perks on it. Like it shouldn't exist, but it does, and because it exists, there's a gear grind in PvE. It's like, in my opinion, this is like really, really stupid to even have. Like, why does this exist? Yeah, I don't see a point. But yeah, you have access to new gear. Gladiators is another death artifact in a long list of useless artifacts that they refuse to balance. Yeah, I mean, they don't tend to buff very much. They tend to only nerf when they need to nerf. They did, to their credit, they did buff the Fire Staff artifact. I think it's Inferno. It's not Inferno. I wish I knew my artifact names off the top of my head. It's kind of embarrassing that I don't at this point, but they're not really that memorable. No, it is Inferno. I did say that right. Okay, it just wasn't showing up. That's cool. But they did buff this so that it does 15% damage within if you hit a target within 15 meters. So that one's actually like very valuable now. Because it's actually like another free DPS perk. It's really good. But see if it gets used. Like you have to be like kind of close quarters with it to use it. Can't be just trucking stuff out randomly. Flamethrower buff with that. Yeah, they did nerf flamethrower in the same patch though. So if you stagger a flamethrower, they can actually use flamethrower for like 6 seconds now. But that is reduced by the amount of refreshing a flamethrower user runs. I wonder how this happens. You just have a dartboard for perk allocation. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure this happens because they just asked ChatGPT to like generate gear for New World and like don't look back. I think it's literally that simple to the point where they just don't think about stuff that they did. I think it was Kolensky today in the Discord. He pointed out that like I think he has a grudge about this, but like 4 months ago, AGS's reason for buffing Shirking and Power was that Shirking and Power wasn't getting used while Shirking Heals was. And Shirking and Power is competing at an Amulet slot, and Amulet slots are the most competitive slots in the game in terms of like gear pieces that you run. Like it's actually like super, super competitive because they're all very, very good and valuable. And like gear slots, like in terms of armor, don't really matter as much. And they never bridge that connection, and they're like, oh, Shirking and Power isn't good enough because all these other perks are must runs. They're like, no, Shirking and Power isn't as good as Shirking Heal, so we should buff Shirking and Power. It's like, they don't even belong together. Like, I don't understand that at all. Like, it just seems like such surface level analysis, it doesn't even make any sense. So Shirking and Power and Ring together, lots of Empower. Yeah, like, I mean, you don't really even need to go that far. Like we talked about the empower cap in the video we did the other day. Like the empower cap is only 50%, right? Like you shouldn't be going like too far above that unless you expect to be encountering a ton of weaken. But yeah, it does exist. Also, do you guys see the raid thing that kind of came out where there's only going to be drops for you once per week per raid in total. So then people aren't going to really help other people that are trying to get through the raid for the first time through the raid because they aren't going to be incentivized in terms of gear drops. So people are just going to naturally just form groups and they're just not going to help other people. Like, did anyone else see that? Yeah, Mix has been talking about that since the data mine. Yeah, it's just like, that's... I don't know, man. Like, in my eyes, they introduced 2 new pieces of content, right? They introduced this, they introduced the raid, which I think is somewhere off on an island, hiding somewhere. But, like, that's not actually content. Like, the only content that, like, is coming out in this next patch is literally just OPR has MMR, and 3v3 has MMR. Like, this is, like, placebo content. Like, fresh start is the content here. Like starting over from fresh is, like, actually kind of cool and kind of fun. But, like, the end game is just, like, it's somehow worse than it is right now. Like, the mutations at least have some variety, even if they don't, like, change the mechanics from a week to week. At least there's different mutations every week. And, like, people have to adjust stuff and whatnot. Like, this is literally just slaving. Like, it's logging on. You do an event once a week. And then, like, you don't play New World for the next week. Like, that doesn't sound very fun to me at all. That's what WoW raids do, correct? I think it's something similar to that. I don't really play WoW, but I know Destiny didn't really do that. Like, Destiny... Well, actually, no, Destiny did that, but it was kind of different. Because Destiny's a popular enough game, and people used, like, LFG and things like this. And there are enough game modes to where there felt like there was a variety and there's always something to do. WoW, I'm not sure how it did it. And I feel like Destiny compares better to New World's PvE endgame than WoW, because Destiny's PvE endgame is like 6 players. And WoW's PvE endgame is like, I don't know, like 50 or 100. And New World's PvE endgame is like, what, 10 to 20 players? So... their decisions just reinforce that all of this is ultimately a desperate cash grab. Yeah, I mean, that's been established at this point. I mean, there's some things that are good from the patch. Like, I am very happy for MMR, and I feel like that's the best thing that they've done in the last 2 years, but I still look at games like Albion, and I think that they've done 95% of what New World's done is better, and only 5% that they didn't do better is the combat experience, and the combat experience in New World just took a really big hit when you added aimbot into the game. So they made the end game worse and worse since the Greatsword update. Yeah, Brimstone was the peak end game experience, because you could actually upgrade your OPR gear and like general gear with the Umbrals. Like unironically, Umbral Shards were, like, the best system that we had, and it's the thing that a lot of people hated at the time, but, like, I don't think they've introduced anything better. Oh, the first Gearscore update. I mean, that's the same thing, though. That's the Brimstone Stands. So, Brimstone Stands, like, is the best part about New World's updates. Like, we're just walking around out there. Like, it's actually so cool, like, out in Brimstone. But everything else is, like, a little bit lackluster recently. Like, Elysian Wilds doesn't even stand up to where Brimstone was, in my opinion. It's still pretty good, though. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is all you need to get 725. Oh, did I show you guys the odds of obtaining the gear? Like, the pattern, like, the schematics yet? That's something that's kind of fun to go over. So, like, the simple way of doing this is you do the odds of the drop, right? And it's, like, 1 minus that. So it's 1 minus 1 over 200. This effectively is 0.995, and that's your odds, right? And then you could raise that to the power of, like, n. And then say, like, n equals 200. And then you get, like, the odds of getting this gear after a certain amount of attempts. So if I were to do, like, 52, so this would be after 1 year. What are my odds of obtaining something? So I have a 77% chance of obtaining it after a year. Am I doing this right? No, because it would be it would be 1 minus this. Yeah, it'd be 22%. And the reason why it would be 1 minus this is because it's a 5% chance to drop, right? and then 1 minus 1/200. This was a 5%. So no, it'd be 1 minus this. So it's like a 22% chance to get a schematic to drop if you do the raid once per week for an entire year. Like, what? It literally doesn't make any sense. Like, why is it so low? If I were to do it for 2 years, now it's a 40% chance to drop. If I were to do it for 3 years, now it's a 50% chance to drop. Like, man, you can't make this shit up. Like, what if I did 4? Now it's 65. I do 5. Now it's like, how long do I even have to do it to guarantee a drop? Like, I don't think they have like a loot protection system here either. Okay, so like I'd have to do the raid every single week for like 20 years to get the patterns. 1 schematic for 1 piece, and that's on average. Some people could do the raid for a decade and not get a schematic. Yeah, literally. Like, it doesn't make any sense. They actually have like a 1 in 200 drop rate for this. Whoever gets it's gonna make bank. Literally, I mean, yeah. You think? My original estimate for how much that would go for was like 250k, and now I'm thinking about 500k to 1 mil. Like, it's ridiculous how rare this drop is gonna be. I heard your calls for endgame content, so we made the endgame content last for 20 years. Oh, man, it drives me nuts. Anyway, it doesn't really make sense. But, like, Brim is, like, so cool compared to everywhere else in this game. Like, I feel like they nailed this update so much. Like, it's a giant zone. Like, it's actually new. Like, they got rid of First Light to give you Elysian. Like, the coolest part about Elysian is probably, like, the mobs that, like, spawn and people fight every now and then. But, like, they're not really much content. Like, it's kind of boring. But you can fight them, and I know there's some artifacts that drop from them. But they just haven't really nailed this. I think someone earlier said, do you think CK influence will stay? The answer to that's no. And the answer why we know that, I forget how you look at the influence race, or like the influence you have per zone. Is it like you hover over it or something like that? But like the influence that you had for First Light's gone now, so it's not gonna be there for Cutlass Keys either. Is there any artifact worth unlocking with the current season if I've not logged in yet? Yeah, there's a couple. So there's 2 ways to look at this. There is the I want to play the game the way that AGS intended way, and then there's the I want to optimize the heck out of the game. If you want to optimize the heck out of the game, you would think that higher number here is better. It turns out lower number is better. Like, you want to be a high level? Well, actually, no, you want to be a low level and you want to have a low number, but you want to have high attributes. And the items that will give you the most attributes but reduce them the most are basically your offhand. So I can remove 37 focus here and put on like a really low gear score piece. And that will effectively boost my survivability a lot, and will also boost the damage in my other weapon. Which doesn't make any sense, but that's just how it works in New World for some reason. So yeah, using low gear score stuff is actually better, and how that pertains to artifacts is like, I can get like these Creed boots, right? And they're like 700 gear score, or I could upgrade them and get them to 725. I think it's actually better to use the 700 variant than the 725 variant. Which doesn't make any sense. But it makes sense to get the lower level gear. Now, the weird part about this too, that I kind of want to test, but it's kind of hard to set up a situation for this, is I'm pretty sure it's better to use like 700 gear score items than 725 gear score items, which completely eliminates the endgame grind. But the reason why I say that is if I were to look at like New World Buddy, for example, and like look at one of these items, right? So say I have this item and it's at 700. Now I have like what? 354 armor. And then I increase this to 725. Now I have 473 armor. So I gained like not a lot of armor, but I gained 25 gear score, and that gear score gain is going to be more prevalent, I think, than the armor you gain. So like what, I'm at 580 now, Say I drop this down to 700. I'm still at 580. No, 578. So I lost 2 points. I gained a little bit less armor. Like, I think it's actually worth using, like, lower gear score stuff basically across the board. So, like, I have everything here set for 700, right? And I'm at 578. Say if I were to max all these out. Like, what's my gear score now? Like, now it's 589. Like, is that worth it? And it's like, I don't think it is mathematically in PvP. I think it is in PvE, but the main thing that contributes, like, this doesn't really matter, right? Like, this is like kind of a niche example. The main thing that really matters here is you really want to run a low gear score offhand, and this will just boost your damage the most, and it will boost your survivability the most. And it doesn't make any sense, but that's just how New World works. And if someone wants to come outside of Windsward, I could show you guys that in live time too, but I've done this before. I'm on Valhalla right now. Is there any artifact worth unlocking from current season? Yeah, I just answered that. They should remove this bounce. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's what I've said too, but they've kept it. They said they fixed it, and then like a month later, I was like, did they actually fix it? And I looked at it and I was like, oh wait, they didn't actually fix it. And it's like, oh, that's wonderful. I don't know. We had fun with it for a bit, and then it kind of got boring. Who's even on top on this server anymore? Network check? Why does network check have Windsward? Yeah, I'm still in heaters, but I haven't showed up to a war in forever, and I don't think anyone wants to really. Like, you just keep the territory. But here, let me throw this on, make the flail my main hand, and then keep my focus the same, right? Like, oh, actually, flail's a bad example because it's gonna scale with the strength, so I probably shouldn't use that. And I'm gonna lose strength. Actually, no, that's fine because then I could show the effect of strength. So, like, say I run this right now or whatever. And then, do I have a person I can test with that's out here is the question. Crush, are you on at all? Sometimes Crush is on. I could test with him out here, but like last time I did this, it was beneficial to use a lower gear score offhand, and it made you take like roughly 10% less damage and made you deal like roughly 10% more damage. Do you think it will be nice? Oh, you know, it'd be another fun thing to test out. You guys remember the naked tank stuff? Like, you do a naked tank, you just go shield, you throw on like the wall or something stupid, and then you just put everything in a con and see how long you can survive. I want to see if this still works. I just need someone to duel me. So I should basically take no damage here. And I don't. So at least they fixed that. Now let me put on armor. They really call this build Lingza? That's so funny. And we go back to it again. Make sure everything's in the con that I can. So this is like what I was testing with like the armor stuff. Like, is it worth reducing armor? Yeah, now I don't take any damage, right? So this is like the kind of build that I want to run in like the new instance. Because then, like, say I've taken all this damage, and I could just turn around and start blocking, right? Like, I'm using my target lock here. I'm just blocking. I'm just blocking. Like, I'm not popping pots. I pop my defender's resolve. Like, I'm super, super tanky still. Like, you know? So it's like, that's like kind of the setup I'm going for. It's like you want to lower your gear score as much as possible, but keep your armor as high as possible. And I think that's the best balance, which basically means reduce your offhand, reduce your main hand if you want to be tankier, but I don't think we're going to go that far, and then reduce the gear score of your jewelry a bit too. So that's what Gearscore Bug. At least they fixed the part where it's like, if you're naked, you're not super tanky. Like, it used to be more tanky if you're completely naked, so it seems like they made armor a little bit more important, so maybe it is worth, like, running max gear score armor, running a max gear score main hand if you want to do some damage, and then just lowering the gear score of your offhand and stuff like that. But, yeah, it's a little silly. Like, I shouldn't be able to take that many hits, especially considering I have, like, what, 5% thrust resist? That guy's doing thrust damage, and he had Rens on me, which was reducing the potency of my armor and stuff like that. And I'm not using a tower shield too, so I could have blocked a lot more damage. Like, you, in that new setting, you'd probably want a thrust ward shield or something like that, or thrust ward on amulet. Like, strike protection doesn't really do anything in open world, only in war. So, I don't know, there's stuff like that. Some people could do. Wait, no, we already read that. I don't know. I don't really have a lot else to talk about today. I have Albion stuff I want to do later. Kind of want to eat food. Uh, I don't know if I want to queue OPR. I kind of want to wait for the MMR change to queue OPR, and I don't think gear score really matters that much. So I might just keep characters kind of the same and just play on fresh. I was gonna try it again, but the aim assist is a no more for me. I just can't. I'll just wait till the 25th and play Ashes. You have to buy Ashes again, right? Like, it's $120 or something like that, and then you have to pay after that and to play the actual game as well. Meeker buddy, your talents would be so much better spent on a game that's good. I mean, I've been doing some of that with like other games. I just haven't been making videos about it. My issue is I don't like to make videos about things that I haven't like mastered, and there's a lot of games I've been playing that I haven't necessarily mastered. So, time to make a new guide for where to get your low gear score items. Pretty much. Teardrop is great. Teardrop's my favorite item in the game. What games? Lol. Gaming is dead. There's a couple. Uh, Helldivers got a really, really big update recently, and that was made the game like a lot more fun again. Not really popular, but more fun. There's been a few big content creators have been looking at it. Deadlock is still probably the most fun game I've played recently. Uh, is there anything else? I mean, Albion's pretty fun. The problem I've been having with Albion has been that I'm trying to record stuff or trying to stream stuff with that game, and like my PC's like actually fried because it's just 200v200 man combat, and there's a bunch of particle effects flying everywhere. My PC's like, no, stop, please make it stop, and just like poops itself. But everything else there is good. No, I paid early and they changed that. Enough people griped, so they fixed it. So what's the new Ashes system? It's just if you get in and you don't have to pay? Because if Ashes like did not have a paywall to test stuff early on, I'd probably look at it a bit more seriously, at least the next round. Probably not this first round. No, it's a little bit late for this first round. I think there's one item in Deadlock that kind of functions similarly to how buggy items do in New World, and it's escalating exposure. That's like a really fun one to do the math on. But I don't know. No, it's still 110 if you haven't bought anything before. But does that 110 get you into the actual game as well? Or is that only applied to the beta? Alpha and beta. Yeah, so that's how it was before. You still have to buy the actual game when it comes out, right? Oh, the actual game will be subscription based with no buy-in? Okay. Eh, more chat happening here than on Twitch. Yeah, the YouTube chat's popping more now. Keen speed on heavy boots. This game literally just wants to keep making the heavy SNS build more demoralizing. Yeah, it is kind of just based around the keen speed on heavy boots. It's a little silly. I guess knowing what I know now, like if I were to make a build guide for like the most tanky build in the game, it'd be something akin to this. Like you wouldn't necessarily run like this gear, but like the idea is you run high gear score armor. You run low gear score on your amulet, ring, and earring. Your main artifact should be high gear score, and then you use a low gear score offhand. Your main artifact could, or your main hand could also be low gear score if you wanted to too, and it would make it really really tanky. And then like this would be basically infinite survivability versus the musket builds. Like you just need to, like if you run slash shield ward here, you just have to make sure that you run thrust protection on your amulet and then like gem somewhat decently and you're just fine. 110 gets you in for the entirety of the thing and then a few months for free. Yeah, the sub stuff's always kind of interesting. I think the sub base is the best way to go with an MMO because it encourages devs to continue to put work into the game. Uh, I still like how Albion does it more, where you can sub if you want advantages, but you don't have to sub. Because, like, if I want to just PvP in Albion, there's no point in subbing, basically. But if I want to PvE, then there's kind of a big point. Alright, what messages do I have in Discord? Is it all Albion stuff? Seems like it's all Albion stuff. There's no way we're auctioning another mammy off to our guild. I think we lost a mammy yesterday. We got another mammy. Wait, we actually got another. There's no way we got another mammy. We did really bad in open world yesterday. We got another mammy in Albion, which is the most expensive item in the game. God damn it. It's getting blessed. It's so funny. Uh, Albion system is pretty good. Yeah, I mean the way that Albion works it out is if you die, you lose your gear, right? So it's a lot of like risk reward management. I don't know. Like I don't like it's something you have to get over, but it's like kind of like Tarkov where it's like full loot. Like you get over it at a certain point, and then it's like it becomes really really fun. But it's rough at times too. Like I do not like transporting my gear everywhere, but you get used to that. Think Savior Helm is gonna work on shirking, killing, tomb, death, defy death. It should just work on the life staff stuff, but should's a very strong word. I wouldn't be surprised if it does. And it's probably gonna be a little broke. Very early on, I've been out of New World loop for months. You think IGVG will still be war viable? Yeah, IGVG will be played in war. I think IGVG will be less played in war than it is right now. And I would expect Flail VG to be picking up some more steam and become a little bit more popular. And the main reason for that is the new Flail artifact is like the best utility artifact in the game by far. Like it's not even close. Like Power Stone is insane. If health is above 90%, attacks cause a 20% weaken for 5 seconds, 5-second cooldown for each target. Like that is actually the best artifact that's a utility artifact in the game that's come out. Flail Vortex also going to help with the stagger chains on Clump. Is it? Vortex doesn't help with stagger. Vortex helps with freedom, like roots. Like that's never been a part of Flail. Like the Vortex, like it is helpful, but it's like more cosmetic than anything, to be honest. Like the main part of Flail, like it's kind of changed a few times, but Flail's Smite is like the best ability on Flail right now. Vortex at one point was the best ability, but that was because Smite was bugged and it didn't actually apply the weaken that it said it applied. Now it actually applies the weaken, and Smite's like the best ability bar none, and everyone just plays for Smite uptime basically. It's like Smite's really important. Vortex is kind of mid, like it's okay. And then Trip is decent, but not insane. Like the last ability doesn't really matter. You can kind of go anything you want to. Just wonder if we're gonna see Flail and Clump play a lot more. I think we will. Like right now there's like 1 to 2 flails per 50 men in War. And I usually use War because it's the most optimized game mode. I think after this patch we'll be able to use OPR starting at that. I would expect to see like roughly double the amount of flails, and those are mostly going to be taking flail or IGVG slots. Not because IGVG isn't bad, but because this flail artifact is like too damn good. Like it is so powerful. Like I'm sure there's going to be some company leader it's going to be like, oh, we just need like 1 or 2 people to run flail and they can maintain this 20% weak on literally on everyone in the whole army. And it's like, no, it does not work that way. Like just run a few flails and you will feel so tanky. I feel that they lost the plot with artifacts. It went from new interesting items to let's give flail more weaken. It's just flail, that's more flail. Yeah, I mean, I'd argue that they've only printed like 4 really cool artifacts in the game, maybe 5 or 6 if you include like Blood Drinker and Ankh, like I think are fundamentally kind of cool. Phoenix is kind of cool. But I'd argue like all the artifacts that cause your attack to do a different element of damage are neat, but in practice are just bugged. And then Scorpion Sting, and like everything else is like kind of boring. Like the SNS artifacts like kind of cool. Like Odo's like kind of cool, but isn't really that insane in practice. Like I'm sure it will be used in the solo island, but it's not that insane in practice. I don't know. Sweet, I prefer the support playstyles, so that's great. Yeah, it's like the support stuff is still fine in this game. I think I'm gonna go eat food, and then I have Albion stuff coming up in a bit, and I haven't figured out a way to stream the Albion stuff. But I've been doing like kind of short and sweet streams because I haven't been wanting to play the game like too much. But when Fresh Start comes out, I'm probably gonna be playing Fresh Start a decent amount. Uh, and OPR, and I think that's mostly the content I'll interact with at the end game for New World. Like I don't think the other stuff's like super interesting to me. I thought about other games too, but like Deadlock's the only other game I've really had fun with so far. And I don't think I really fit in with that one completely. I think the way I would fit in a Deadlock is like a math guy. And there's a guy called Deathy that does a lot of the math right now, and I think I could do like some of what he does, but a little bit better. But that's the only spot I really fit in with that game. Thanks for all the useful info as always. Your insights are always appreciated, man. Yep. Is there anyone that's streaming on Twitch that's worth hosting? So I give somebody views. Is Anda actually playing the game? Willie's shoutcasting War still? Okay, I'm definitely hosting Whirl though. Whirl's the homie.
The Pete's design team doesn't care that.
I can't believe Whirl's still playing in Wars. Also, his war just ended, but too late to hit the raid button. I don't know what Whirl's gonna do with the new Bruiser stuff though. It's gonna be a little interesting. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Peace.